Hey, everybody. Welcome to another live episode of Mavens of Data. We've got a great show for you today. I'd love to hear from folks in the audience. If you would drop into the chat and just let us know where you're joining from, that would be really awesome. Today, we're talking about telling your data story, and we've got a fantastic guest here, Scott Taylor, aka the Data Whisperer. Spoiler alert, he doesn't whisper very often. But I'd love to, Scott, have you just quickly introduce yourself to our audience. That would be great.
Hey, John. Thanks for having me. Thrilled to be here. Hello, Maven audience here, Mavens of Data. Scott Taylor, Data Whisperer. I am a full-time content creator in the data space. I help people understand the power and value of proper data management versus the sexier, hotter, cooler stuff like analytics and Gen AI. We could talk about that all day long. You can boil my entire data philosophy down to 3 words: truth before meaning. You want to determine the truth in your data before you derive meaning. So explaining the meaning of my truth hat, obviously I'm on that team. And I do a variety of different types of content, all to capture the attention of data management folks, to help them capture the attention of C-level executives, business stakeholders, other people in their organization they want to engage and get support from and get funding. You need money for a lot of this kind of stuff. And I try to do fairly creative things. In fact, we're going to show a little video here. We've got some documentary footage. Here we go.
Hello, I'm the CDO. I must create a data-driven utopia of interoperability where insights flow freely from workflow to edge across integrated ecosystems. And I have to fix the quarterly reports. Let's give a call to IT and see how they're doing. We'll patch them in.
It's the ITB here.
Hello, IT. What do we need to create my data-driven utopia of interoperability and fix the quarterly reports?
Our resources are devoted to the metadata content and analytics graph hub fabric mesh to enable the operational infrastructure scaling of the digital transformation.
I thought I was good at buzzwords.
Buzz, buzz, buzz. And we have to fix the quarterly reports.
You should be a ghillie.
A ghillie?
Yes, a ghillie. A-G-I-L. Look in Wikipedia. Look under Agile.
Let me check with the head of the tiger team.
I'm sure we could scrum something up.
Here's what they've got. Soap. Yawn. Rest.
I'm ready for a bath, a sweater, and a nap.
Python. Panda. Bark. Whoa, dangerous. What else you got down there? Kafka. JSON. A lot of JSON. Squirrel. SQL. NoSQL. And what's a pirate's favorite programming language? R.
R.
And the latest, greatest, and buzziest.
Oh, does that go with the pirate?
No, it doesn't have anything to do with the pirate.
But it's a ship.
Try this then. See if you can sound it out.
Kubernetes.
Eyes. Kubernetes.
Kubernetes!
One more thing.
Toilet paper?
After all that integration, we're gonna have to clean up our back end.
Now, what about the data?
The data?
I don't have the data.
Yeah, what about the data?
The data?
Why would I have anything to do with data?
You're IT!
It's information technology. You're the CDO.
CDO is Chief Dog Officer. The business has the data.
The business has it.
Sorry I'm late for the call. I'm a little dizzy from our customer 360. What about the data? It's the new oil.
I thought you had the data.
I don't have the data. I'm the business. Let's go fix the quarterly reports. After you fix the quarterly reports, can we start monetizing our big data? Wow. If it's so big, how come I can't see it?
What about my analytics graph hub fabric mesh?
Stop with the buzzwords.
That stings.
I don't have any data.
Kubernetes.
Now what do we do? I don't
Why
have
is
any
everybody
data.
always coming
Why
to
would
me
I have
for
my
the
data?
Does that sound like your organization?
That's it. Does that sound like your organization, everybody? Does that sound like what you're trying to deal with? Implement an analytics graph hub fabric mesh, or create a data-driven utopia? Or are you out there debating the nuances between data products, data as a product and data productization, then you're probably in good company among the rest of us trying to articulate the value of data management and data to your stakeholders. That's what happens.
I think it's resonating pretty well, Scott. A lot of love for the video here.
I can see that
in the comments, which is fantastic. Let's get into the meat of the conversation. So here are some of the questions we're going to cover today.
Okay.
And Scott, I'll ask you some relatively easy questions for you. Our audience is absolutely going to love them. So just to start things off, why do you think data storytelling is such an important thing for anybody in data to be good at?
You got to be able to communicate the value of what you're talking about. So I've been in storytelling since it was 2 words. I go way back. And in data storytelling, I believe there's 2 types. So there's the classic data storytelling out there that people know of. I would consider it more analytics storytelling, how to take an insight or a metric or some form of analysis and put it in a business context to drive action. There's 20 books out there about that. Super, some of them written by great friends of mine, super important to do. But in my truth before meaning construct, there's another type of data storytelling, which is stories about why managing data is of strategic importance to your enterprise.
Yeah.
Why should we focus on data governance? Why is data stewardship important? Why is data quality something that actually has a strategic significance? So these 2 types of data storytelling out there, one about data, that's the one I focus on, and one with data that a lot of business intelligence and analytics folks focus on. They're both important. This is, not Sophie's choice here. You need them both. But I really felt there was a gap in the space to put a narrative and a business accessible communication approach towards data management as well. And it seems to have resonated, especially with the data management community. And, really built on this idea that if you don't get that stuff right, then none of the other fancy analytics stuff is going to matter.
Yeah. It's so true, Scott. I'd love to hear from folks in the audience in the chat. When you hear the words data management, what are some of the things that are coming to mind? And Scott, while they're doing that in the chat, I'd love you to talk a little bit more about that, because you focus so much on that data management side, whereas at Maven, I'd say we focus less on that. We're a little more focused on the storytelling that an analyst would do, trying to get meaning out of the data. But you're really focused upstream on the truth before the meaning, which I love that phrase. And talk to us a little bit more about like what goes into data management from your perspective.
It is that building that foundation. And so I'm sure that all of your data stories that you help people put together on the analytics side are inextricably linked to the quality of the data going into it. Yep. GIGO is the shortest way to talk about it. Garbage in, garbage out. We all learned that on the first day of data.
Yep.
It's as sure as gravity, right? What goes up must come down. What goes in must come out. And we continue to try and, at least folks on my end, try and reinforce that. I like to think about where data starts versus where data ends up. Where data ends up is what the business sees, is what drives action, but you've got to start in the right place. So a million different analogies or constructs or ways to say it, but I've found that, generative AI now, the hottest thing going on, and all of a sudden people are talking about AI governance. Oh, really? Oh, gee. When COVID hit, people were rushing into e-commerce, but they realized they stumbled on the fact that they didn't have the proper, well-structured product data.
Yep.
Data science before that, and people were complaining about spending 80% of their time munging and wrangling data, and probably the other 20% complaining about munging and wrangling data. Then all of a sudden, I think it was Andrew Ng, if you know him, top thought leader in the data science space, comes up with this, and a little bit sarcastic here, this brilliant observation that if you want to make your models work better, be less model-centric and be more data-centric. Don't fine-tune your models, fine-tune the data. It's like, okay, duh. It's another version of GIG. You can go all the way back to general ledger, and people said we need a chart of accounts. So basically, from Gen AI to Gen Ledger, it's the same story. You got to get the good stuff coming in first before you can really take advantage of it later. And it just seems to be a message that, despite its significance and its sheer logic, that we still have to find new ways to communicate.
Yeah, and that's Scott, that was going to be my next question. Like, it seems like every person who works in data is so familiar with the term garbage in, garbage out, yet like you still have a job advocating for good data, right? Like why is that? Why can't we actually focus on it? Do you have any hypotheses for that?
I wish I know. I wish I didn't have this job, I guess, at certain point. It's like I've given up on saying we're going to eventually solve it, but it just seems to be this recurring theme, and people get distracted by the super cool stuff and forget. But if you think about just personally, right? We all want to be healthy. We want to be fit. And what do they tell us? Eat right and exercise.
Yeah.
And we're all looking for shortcuts on that too, whether it's, a shot of Ozempic or, whatever happens. We're always looking for shortcuts. It feels like it's part of human nature. And data management inherently, I didn't look at all the comments yet, but when the first thing that people think of in data management is probably something around boring, clerical, back office, mindless, internal kinds of activity that don't get people excited.
Yeah.
So that's why I thought I would certainly over rotate on where I believe the excitement is on the data management side.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I was scanning through the comments here, and people are talking about data quality, integrity, reliability, having a true source of data. So I think people have been listening to you, which is a good sign. Didn't hear too many people saying, it's boring or it's really hard, although
okay. Well, good. That's good.
Yeah, but it's true. I think a lot of people, and same thing, like I think your analogy to health is so important, because it's like we know what to do, but it can just be hard. It takes a lot of vigilance. It takes like constant effort, and there's other things we want to be doing. So it seems pretty natural that things become chaotic, and that data management seems hard for organizations. And glad you're there to help them work on it.
I wanted to build on that your first question there in terms of storytelling, because just in general, whether it's analytic storytelling or data management storytelling, whatever it happens to be, those are soft skills. And most people who come into the data space, regardless of which part they land into, tend to focus, are there because they know hard skills.
Yeah.
Those are, the technical aspects, the governance aspects, the analytics aspects, whatever it happens to be, those tend to be really hard skills, and they don't really get that soft skill training in a lot of cases. But if you want to be a leader of any sort, and certainly if you want to be a data leader, you must start to bone up on those soft skills. I always find it a little bit ironic in the nomenclature there, right? Because the soft skills are so hard. I'm a pure soft skill guy. I don't get under the hood the way I describe it in kind of classic design, technical design fashion. I'm great at conceptual. I can talk myself through logical, but I don't get physical. I don't touch anything. I never look under the hood. I don't know how it gets done, but I can articulate why it's important. And so I want to be that person raising the flag to remind people, focus on why data is going to help enable the strategic intentions of your enterprise, why where you want to go as a company you can only get there if you've got the right kind of data. And that will open up the conversation with the business side, with your executive leadership, and again, the people who've got the money to do what you want to do.
Yeah. And I think that's that area that you focus on, the why, like getting people to buy in, realize that this is so important. It only matters more as you get higher up and you're fighting for resources and you're trying to do that. And so I'd say I'm curious to get some advice for some folks in your audience. So for me personally, I've kind of been at two different types of companies. I'd bucket them two different ways. One where they were already pretty good at data and investing a lot and they really cared. And then another bucket where they really weren't yet, but they wanted to. And the CEO already wanted to. So like I came in to do the work, but I was lucky enough that I had the CEO's backing. I've never been in the third bucket of company where the CEO and upper management just doesn't care about data much at all and doesn't know why it's so important. I'm curious I know you encounter folks that, like, a lot of times you have to advocate and you tell people how to advocate for it. Any advice for somebody who feels like they're in that situation, like management doesn't care enough as they should?
In the third bucket of where they've
Yeah.
got executive leadership that doesn't understand data at all, get a new job because that place is going out of business in this business.
Yeah.
But it's seriously, there's data in every company.
Yeah.
My comment about if you're not a data-oriented company, then that data is probably sitting in finance and in IT, under leveraged or just used for internal reporting. But you don't have to look very far at all to see what data can do for an organization. In my belief, again, in the same vein of trying to boil things down, truth before meaning being only 3 words, my approach and my thoughts around enterprises is that they all want to provide value to their relationships through their brands at scale.
Yep.
Again, kind of an extensible phrase that would capture any type of company's objectives. Provide value to your relationships through your brands at scale. When you get to scale, that's technology. When you get to technology, that's hardware, software, data. If you have data, you need data management. Obviously, it's totally clear to me. But where is that company trying to go? And what we tend to do as data people is talk about the data reason instead of the business reason. We talk about the outputs instead of outcomes. So focusing on what your business is doing, the essence of your business, you should be very fluent in that. And then find the data capabilities that will help that business get to where it wants to go. Those are the tips I can give in terms of scratching the surface of an organization, no matter what the maturity, to make sure data has a seat at the table. And we're still struggling with that. I don't know why always, but we still are. Part of it I know is the way we talk. So I'm putting a little bit on our own community because I kind of believe the way we talk about data is holding the industry back to a certain extent, which is why I spend so much time helping people rephrase, come up with new ways to talk about what you already know is my mission in the space to a great degree.
Yep. Yeah. And I think I think you nailed it when you said, really start with the business. And it's one of the things we give that advice to our students all the time. And but it's also hard. And it can be hard for me too. It's hard to be this person who's thinking about the database and how things relate to each other and the caveats and where it's coming from, and not jump into that technical stuff too early. But that's also kind of the best advice possible, is like, pretend you didn't even have those skills. What is the business trying to do? How are you trying to help the business? And start there, and then figure out the data solution that aligns with that. If you could do that, it's like 80% of the battle is already won. I think is starting with that business outcome. So
there's so many problems every organization has that data can help. And the beauty of being in the space, and part of why I love being in it so much, is I don't know another department that can provide this kind of horizontal value across all the vertical silos in an organization. It helps marketing, it helps sales, it helps finance, it helps legal, it helps operations. Name a department that data doesn't help in, and I'll probably prove you wrong. What other part of the organization has that sort of opportunity? And yet we struggle so much. You can't go too far on LinkedIn without seeing various debates about how to articulate value and where data has value and how do we explain it. And we just get in our own way sometimes. I mean, if you go talk to enough business people in your organization across a bunch of departments and listen to their problems and listen to what they're struggling with and listen to where they think the opportunities are, you're going to find a data answer that's going to help them.
Yeah. It's a really good point how versatile the skill set of a data professional is, and it's you can add value to so many different parts of the business, and it also keeps it kind of really fun from my perspective as a practitioner. Like, you're not always just working on a marketing activity. It might be a product thing, it might be customer stuff. Like, some people, not myself, would get excited about like manufacturing analytics. Like, I worked at a large company, and people were so excited on the manufacturing analytics team to figure out, hey, how can we look at different suppliers and defect rates and save the company money. So there's just so many ways to apply that skill. And I love the point about just go talk to the different business stakeholders, and you're going to find some problems that they have, and you might be the one to solve it because you've got the data skills that they don't. So yeah, fantastic advice there.
Especially if they want to scale. And but we still get in our way, right? Look at the titles we use. So CDO, I think is really important, but now CDAO, CDAIO, CDAIOU, sometimes YO, whatever we're adding, it just, again, that's the part where I think we get in our own way. I mean, you would never have, part of an exercise that I encourage people to do is imagine a department in the company talking the way we do. Finance doesn't ponder endlessly, existentially about the value they bring to the organization, nor is there a CFO who suddenly wants a CARO and a CAPO working under them because, or a CMO who wants a CTVO and a C radio. Oh, I'm just making this stuff up here because it sounds so ridiculous. But think about how we sound. We need 12 different C-level titles now to handle every aspect of data. And we've got the latest, greatest thing now bursting in that's going to work. After last year, we had the latest, greatest thing. After 2 years before that, we had something else that was going to happen.
Yep.
We as a group, as kind of part of the environment, I think the data world has some credibility issues with the rest of the enterprise, to say the least.
Yeah. And it's interesting. Like, think about how important credibility and trust is as a data person. If you want to actually make an impact somewhere, but you've got a credibility problem, like you're hopping around on one leg, right? You're really, really, maybe at best, right? It's really, really challenging. For folks in the audience, I'd love just if you guys can start throwing questions on there. We might even start answering them early. We'll see how it goes. Scott, it's interesting. You mentioned kind of the latest and greatest tools. You've been through a few cycles of, hey, these new tools. I have my own opinion. Like, what do you think about, like, everybody obviously is so excited about Gen AI. Do you have strong opinions on where that's falling these days?
Other than just waiting for the AI governance discussion to show up, I tend to be not a trends guy. I'm the guy in the back of the room going, okay, whatever the next thing is, I spend my time finding where the data management hook is going to be.
Yeah.
So I just watch the new things develop, and having been in data since literally pre-2K in my case, so I started off in the 90s. It's just this cycle just keeps going. Like, new thing comes up, and then you need to, my whole litany I went through from Gen AI to General Ledger. It's the same kind of thing, because there's a true cause and effect relationship. I mean, every digitally transformative customer-facing initiative is inextricably linked to the successful output of the data management efforts. There's just kind of no two ways about it.
Yeah.
So whatever's going to be next is still going to need the kinds of things that I talk about. So I feel fairly secure in my position, a little bit cynical, and I guess sort of mildly disappointed, thinking, okay, 20 years of ranting is going to help, and it's going to change it. But it's clear that some of it just might be the nature of enterprises and priorities, and how people get distracted, and what looks sexy versus what the reality is.
Yeah. It is really interesting, and it's interesting to hear you sort of be agnostic to the latest tool, because no matter what the tool is, the layer that you're focused on, quality data and data management, is it's paramount to whatever that tool is. Whether it was spreadsheets, or now it's a BI tool like Power BI or something, or now it's Gen AI maybe that could do some stuff, but it doesn't matter as long if that data management layer isn't there. It's all junk, it doesn't work. So yeah, it's really interesting to hear your perspective on that. And hopefully,
I mean, think about spreadsheets, right? Let's look at spreadsheets. Try and bang two spreadsheets together. What happens? People add the columns, no problem, but they can't align the rows.
Yep.
The columns are easy. Rows are hard. And it's like columns are the meaning, rows are the truth. Columns are the, there's the vertical, there's the horizontal.
Yeah.
There's the silo, there's the foundation. This geometry is just very consistent.
Yeah.
And which proves to me, okay, there's something really there. These constructs all fit together in a way that at least I recognize and try to illuminate for folks to say, it's in there.
Yeah,
You'll find it.
And I think like that your sort of position that, hey, no matter where it goes, like my piece is secure. I think folks in the audience here who are thinking about their careers, like take some guidance from that, in the sense that, Power BI 20 years from now, I don't know if that's going to be the thing that people are still using. It could be, maybe not, maybe, but the concept of understanding how to have data quality, data governance, and how to know if you have those things and implement a program, like those things are not going anywhere. And so if you're interested in learning those skills, I think they'll pay dividends for a very long time, and it's probably a pretty safe bet. So yeah, that's awesome.
Good advice. Yes.
Yeah, it's fantastic to hear you talk about it. I want to put up a quick poll for the audience. So let me throw this up on the screen. Basically, I'm curious how you would rate your own data storytelling skills, and I'll give myself pretty good. And a lot of people saying sort of middle of the road, need a lot of work, pretty good, room to improve. Scott, for folks who think they have some room to improve their storytelling skills, you're the person to ask. I feel like
I'll brag a little bit, but I have, a fear of not public speaking. That's my approach. And a comment I got from a recent event that I did was I was an 11 out of 10. So that's, but again, it's a team sport. I play my position really well, but I stick to my position.
So how about for somebody who rates themselves like somewhere in the 2 to 6, so they've got some room before the ceiling. What advice might you give to somebody about maybe being better at telling stories, data stories?
When I look at data storytelling, divided up into 3 segments there: data, story, and telling. And most folks are best at the data part. I understand the data.
Yep.
I hear what it's trying to tell me. How do I put the story together, which is some form of narrative, beginning, middle, end? Understand story structure. Take it out of the data space, but understand story structure. You don't start with the ending always. The kind of story you're going to tell in a business environment is generally a pitch of some sort. How to get people to take action on what you are sharing with them. That's different than some epic romantic novel story. So make sure you've got the right genre you're focusing on. And then the last piece, telling. Get good at that. That takes technique. I did a lot of theater in college. I did community theater after that. I draw on those skills all the time.
Yeah.
And that's my profession to a great degree, is doing events and getting people inspired and so on. But even if you're not at that level, and again, this is all I do, get better at it. Get up in front of people. Go to a local Toastmasters group and, get better at the techniques. Do practice, rehearse, do it in the mirror. Get those butterflies, managed in some way. Because when the time comes, you got to deliver.
Yeah.
And the first time you tell a story tell the story you want to tell to your CEO, better not be the first time you've said it aloud. And it's super easy to skip that part.
Yeah.
Because it's hard work. Sometimes it's a little embarrassing. It's intimidating. But get better at the telling part. Simple things. When I'm in a conference room, I stand up when I talk. I stand at the front of the room when I talk. I don't hand something out that everybody can read while I'm talking so they're distracted. These are simple techniques. There's a million of them out there, but those things are super effective. And understanding that craft to some level is important. And find other people in your organization to help you if you can. If you've part of a big company, there's probably a corporate communications department. There's probably some personal development opportunities in terms of presentation skills.
Yep.
Do all that stuff. Even a little bit helps. Even a little bit helps. Talk to, if you got buddies in sales, if salespeople don't tell a story, they don't make quota. They're the best storytellers in your organization. I come from sales, in case you didn't notice. I loved it my whole career. And part of it is that storytelling aspect, and a very specific kind of storytelling aspect that gets somebody from, I have no idea what you're talking about, to how do we live without this? That's the journey you want to bring people. So learn. It's a bit of a long-winded answer here, but I just want to reinforce that telling part is the part that a lot of folks in data storytelling don't focus enough on.
Big time. Yeah, I that totally resonates with me. And I'd say a lot of folks who are in data tend to be kind of maybe a little more introverted. They like the problem solving, the technical stuff. It could seem really scary, getting up in front of a room, or even just, presenting to senior leaders. I think I was in that bucket starting out, and it comes with time. It comes with getting the reps in and just getting better. So I think the advice is just great. Like, figure out whatever you can do to get those reps and get feedback. One of the things in doing this show, I asked a couple of guys that I work with, just, hey, watch the show, the first couple of them, and just tear me apart. Like, what could I be better at? And that, I found that exercise being really helpful, getting a couple of people that I trust. They told me things, they were blunt, I'll say. And I think it really helped. So having people that can do that, and, maybe watching yourself on camera. Everybody's got a camera on their phone now. Present into it, do that simply, like,
Totally.
Getting those reps. It's everything, and it's so under practiced. Yeah.
I do that. People who are trying to elevate their content game, or the kind of advice they, ask me around public speaking and things, I tell them, have you recorded what you've done? Did you record it? Did you even just voice?
Did you break it
just
down?
Even the audio.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Then how are you going to get better? You don't have a director following you around trying to give you all this advice. I certainly don't. And I'm constantly reviewing my own stuff, watching it. I mean, I think I'm in fairly advanced techniques that I do, because, again, this is what I do for a living. So I've got to be that much better at some of these ways to execute. But you're always figuring it out, and you got to listen to yourself. Verbal tics, humming and hawing. Do you kind of use things, lean on certain phrases that just fill the air?
Yep.
These are some of the more advanced things to look at, but listen to yourself, watch yourself, get better at communicating.
Yeah. That's
in whatever way possible.
There's no shortcut there either, right? Like, that's just how you do it.
And most data people love to talk about how they got there. So first we did this, and then that didn't work, and then we did this, and then we tried that. You're losing them already. That's not why they're in the room with you. They're in the room with you because somehow they think you're going to help them. I don't care who that audience is. And if you're in the room, and I've spent more than my share of time with very senior leaders, you got to get right to that point. Your meeting might get cut in half. You didn't get through all 100 of your slides.
Yeah.
You got to be ready. There's a lot of jazz technique in presenting this kind of stuff too, where you've got to shift to it. So understand what you're looking for before you even go in. And another tip is know what to do when they say yes. So what if you got an hour and they love it in 15 minutes and they say yes? What are you going to do? My dad had taught me. My dad was a salesman, one of the great salesmen of all time. And he taught me, and this is in my book, when you get the yes, shut up. Meaning, don't keep selling.
Yep.
I learned that the hard way. But also know what the next steps are. Okay, great. I know you spent all this time putting a 100-page deck together, but if they say yes after 20, don't show them the other 80 slides.
Yeah, don't bore them to death.
Oh, we had even more examples to show you here. I wanted this other really get to it. Business needs to move forward. These people want to move forward. And if you end up giving them some time back, you'll get invited back again. But think it through. It's no time to wing it with your executive
Yeah.
staff when you're looking for money and support. That is not the time to just go, we'll just see how it goes.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. I think that's great advice. If you get that sort of buy-in, they're asking the next question. Okay, what do we do? How do we get it done? And hopefully you come armed with the answers to those, right? And they're going to love you for it. So
I worked with the CEO at Nielsen who had this phrase. He sprung on me once, and he just said, "What's the one thing I can do for you?" I was like, I kind of came up with something. It's like, I just missed. It's like rubbing a genie in the bottle. And
yeah,
what are your 3 wishes? Oh, can I get another wish? Because I'm not ready. Be ready for that. What if they said that? What if they said that to you? What's the one thing you want? It's not 5 things. What's the one? So when you go in, what's that one thing you want? And you might get it.
Yeah. I love that framework. And like you talked about, you've got 100 slides, probably too much, but if you can boil it down to, these are my top priorities, 1 or 2 things that I really want the business to do as a result of all this work I've put in, start with that. Don't wait till slide 98, kind of get to it pretty quickly, be really clear about that. And just at least in your head, know the answer to that question, I think is really good advice too. Yeah, that's fantastic.
Bucketing those things help too. Like I have a beat in my presentations where I talk about there's only 3 ways to get value out of data: grow, improve, and protect. On purpose, because you want to aggregate things up. There might be 20 things you can do, but okay, and we want to grow the business, increase sales, penetration, better market. We want to improve the business, operational efficiency. We want to protect the business, like mitigate risk. I encourage people to not have 12 things, even if there are 12, roll them up. People remember those. They go, okay, this is about growing the business. This is about and who's going to argue with we want to grow the business or improve the business or protect
come with those themes. Yeah, that's great advice too, right? If you're too specific, but it doesn't layer up into what really matters. Yeah, that's really good advice. Awesome. Scott, I want to help folks learn more about you if they don't already. One of the things that I'll point them to is your book. Could you tell folks a little bit about the book? And I'll put a link up on the screen here.
Telling your data storytelling for data management. As you can tell right on the cover there, it's 99. That's in focus. 99% buzzword free. Did not want to overpromise. I have to update. I'm just going to put with Gen AI on the front because that'll update everything because it's the same story. But that book is a compendium of my background in the data space, putting a common data story together. I've got some tips and some frameworks in there to help you articulate it. You shouldn't have to start from scratch, and then a bunch of examples of kind of corporate stories that really are about data without saying they're about data. It's usually hidden in plain sight somewhere. Leaders talk about it without really talking about it. And it's your job to kind of be here behind those words and find the data element of what they're talking about. And there's a pithy little framework in there I call the 3 V's of data storytelling for data management, kind of a knowing wink to the 3 V's of big data, but instead of volume, velocity, variety, mine are vocabulary, voice, and vision. And we've hinted at some of those, but the idea that you want to create an accessible vocabulary, talk in the business language, you want to harmonize to a common voice so everybody understands what you're saying and your team and how you market that. And then you want to enable your business vision with data. Everything you do in data has got to be able to help the company get to where it wants to go.
Yeah, awesome.
It's very quick summary, but again, trying to find sort of a pithy, quick, memorable way to create some constructs to help people through that. But start with that vocabulary. Get the words right.
Yep.
Get the words right.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So folks, grab that link. Check out Scott's book. If you're listening on audio format, we'll put that in the show notes too. And now we'll move into the Q&A portion, but quickly before we do that, I want to point folks to some of the upcoming shows that we have. So next week, we've got Megan Bowers. She is going to talk about her very interesting career as an engineer turned analyst, then data journalist and podcast host. She's great. She's the host of the Alteryx podcast called Alter Everything. Then the week after that, we've got George, who's a friend of Scott's. You'll see them at live events together. George is amazing on a very similar related topic, data governance. He's great at this too. Definitely want to check that out. Then we'll have Sonali and Chris the following week. They'll be talking about how they use Excel on the job. So these are folks who they've really made that their powerhouse toolkit, and they're going to talk about some of the ways that they add value for businesses. And then last but not least, we've got Joe Squire talking about how he's thinking about building and leading strong teams in the age of AI and how folks should be thinking about that. So with that, folks, would love for you to join us on a future event. At the end of this, you'll get redirected, and let's jump into Q&A.
George is great. George and I have been traveling the world together to a certain extent. He's part of the Data Avenger team, those of you who know the Data Avengers. And we've done some, we do what we call swag reviews. So we very seriously review the swag at an event. We honor a best of show. We talk about, and I tend to focus on the story. So we always have some crazy swag that we like just because the story behind it was good. So those are fun. Those are on YouTube, and we try to do those wherever we can. But George is fabulous.
Awesome. Yeah. So check George out with Scott as well. And let's jump into some of these questions. So first, we've got a question from Shreyas. I'll read them out for folks who are on audio. So how would you approach a client regarding business requirements for a particular story which doesn't have enough data about the development they need? So interesting. So yeah, I guess if there's not enough data to do the initiative you're trying to do, how would you talk to a client about, hey, you guys need more data? How would you think?
Can you help me with like what data it would be? So that feels like more of an analytics question, not to dodge it totally, but
a little more specific. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, is that, customer data? Is that marketing data? Is it?
Yeah, but I think you, Scott, would be more focused on, communicating the value of why they need to undertake this project and kind of selling that in, and less about the nitty gritty technical implementation.
Yeah. I wouldn't necessarily call this a technical question, but it feels like it's more kind of on the analytics side of we're missing, do we model for this or do we fill it in with some external data, that sort of thing. But, in general, if you've got somebody who wants something and you don't have the pieces, obviously we've got to show them that the pieces are missing. So whatever that particular exercise is, you want to show them, well, we're missing this piece here. We just need this segment. If you know what they need, that feels fairly straightforward to go, okay, we want to plug that hole in. I'm talking conceptually here.
Yep.
We want to plug that hole in with, enhancing it and enriching it with some external data that gives us a better hierarchy or better taxonomies or allows us to uniquely identify these things in a way that we can't seem to, if hopefully that's hitting some of this stuff. But
yeah, I think that's the right advice there. And then this next one, Scott, is I think perfectly in your wheelhouse. So this is from Daniel. And Daniel says, how would you go about convincing a large organization that continually asks for better and faster insights, but refuses to invest in better data management infrastructure, that insights are no good without a solid data foundation? So this is like Scott Taylor.
There we go. All right, both on that one. Couple of ways. One is, one of many techniques is to rub their nose into the crap that they've got that you're trying to make sense of. So they want, this perfect hierarchical structure or this wonderful taxonomy or whatever that happens to be, or, which all drives faster insights. And you show them you've got 157 ways to spell the New York Times or 7-Eleven or Coca-Cola. I got examples in my book. I've got a slide I've been using for 25 years. That's one of the high points of my presentations, where I show 270 different versions of a customer name that came from a real enterprise.
Yeah.
And people are just like, oh, that's me. You're reading my mail. And sometimes you got to shove, all the conceptual stuff, all the theoretical stuff is nice, but you go, this is what's holding us back. Garbage. Yeah. This is the garbage in. I cannot make, I can't make a great meal for you if we don't have the right ingredients. No matter how good the frying pan is and how good a cook I am, it just doesn't work. And as a data person, knowing the provenance of probably the crappy data you're dealing with, kind of show that you're not looking to hang any individuals, but you really don't have the fuel to make that car go. And you can hear me using, use whatever analogy you need to use to make that point.
Yeah.
Food is my favorite category because everybody's got to eat and everybody understands, lousy ingredients make a lousy meal, but find some way to just really show them that and then have the answer. Here's what we need to do to fix this. But this is not about making the analytics better. It's about making the data that goes into those analytics better. And that tends to be the issue. So there's one, there's a bunch of techniques. Again, I wrote a whole book about this, but one is just literally, we used to call it, when I was at Nielsen and selling a data service there, which was it was a master data as a service kind of offering. A technique that we had our sales force do, we affectionately referred to internally as showing somebody their baby's ugly.
Yep.
And you just got to do it. You just got to go, look, this is what I'm dealing with here. We can't get there from here. We got 30 ways to do this. We got 12 ways to name this market. We've got inconsistent taxonomies. We've got a third of our file is duplicates, whatever it happens to be, because all the analytics in the world aren't going to help that. Just like, Gordon Ramsay can't work with rotten tomatoes. He's not going to make them taste any better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's such good advice. And I think one interesting piece that I think you kind of touched on quickly is like, you as the analyst, it's like super obvious to you to folks in the audience who are the analysts that this data is no good, right? And you might even think like, hey, the stakeholder knows that too, but I think a lot of times they don't understand it, or they certainly don't understand it as well as you do. So don't gloss over the fact that like, oh, everybody gets that there's 270 versions of this customer name. Like, that might be a problem that only you are currently feeling the pain of, and you need to kind of rub it in their face. So I think that's really, really good advice. I'm saving.
And even in that question, you said, the questioner said a foundation. Why do you think they call it a foundation?
Yeah.
So, you can't build a house without foundation. I mean, just find the analogies, find the quick little, almost cliched way to describe it. And that might illuminate some folks. And then obviously have some thoughts on how to fix it. How about search before create? That's a popular one.
Yeah.
That helps a lot.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
No, our salespeople have to, just make the sale. Well, I'm not trying to stop them from making the sale, but if they enter a new customer name every time they create a customer, here's the crap downstream that's happening.
Yeah.
And it's got to stop. We got to establish a standard. We have to come up with a common language. I can't align my rows. I got all these columns, but I can't align the rows. So hopefully that helps.
Oh, I think it's great. Here's another one that I think because you work with a lot of companies, you'll be a good person to advise on. So this is from Leandra. She says, in the past, data was a finance topic. The import data was financial. It was profits, cost, margin. Is finance the best place to allocate the data management responsibility, or do you think that should be in its own separate silo? I think I know your answer, but.
Yeah, I don't think anything should be in a silo. And you're absolutely right. Data started in finance. Again, chart of accounts, sales, profits, expenses. That was all data. And then they started to use computers. And so the IT was in finance. And then CIOs happened. And for some reason, they called it information, but it was really, just like in my puppet says, that's information technology. It wasn't really the information itself, and then grew into the data office. But I think that data management should live. I'm not an organizational expert, and there's other folks who have much more educated opinions on this, but data management should roll up into the data office in some sense. And so if your data is still managed, both management and analytics in finance, that's not necessarily the most modern organizational structure, to put it kindly. It should serve finance just like it serves marketing and executive level and manufacturing and sales and everyone else. But a lot of the financial reporting is more kind of, how we did versus where we want to go and how do we get there. And, a lot of data goes into a different other parts of the department, other parts of an organization that have a lot different use cases than what finance would look at. And even hierarchies have trouble, right? People, there's a financial hierarchy, there's a legal hierarchy, there's kind of an operational commercial hierarchy. Those things need to be managed in a way that you can serve all the different constituents, and yet they have the piece parts that can be decomposed and rolled up so they all make sense. They're all working off that same version of the truth in some form or fashion. But obviously I'm allergic to separate silos in any definition.
Yep. Yeah, that's I think that's really smart. And another just piece to add on that is, think about like any of the other functions, you wouldn't expect them to be experts in data, things like data structure, data management, data governance. So you don't have to sell me at all, Scott. It should be its own function with people that are experts in it, and they serve and they collaborate and cross-pollinate with all these other functions. That's typically in my opinion, the correct model that I've seen. It's not always how it's set up, but I think if you do that, you're probably in good shape.
And there's tons of research, tons of writing, tons of thought leadership around having, a CDO, around the value that data can bring when it's organized correctly. If you know a guy named Doug Laney, wrote Infonomics, great, thought leader, personal friend of mine. And he also wrote a book called Data Juice, which was 101 ways to squeeze value out of data. I did one of the 101 for him. But there's plenty of, don't start on your own. The answers are out there. And what I think the beauty of data is the application of it is very similar across organizations and across sectors. So you don't always need a media example if you're a media company, or a finance example if you're a finance company. At the data management layer, I think things are more similar than they are different.
Yeah.
And, use a little creativity to extend that story to make it relevant to your world. But there's lots of stories out there, lots of folks succeeding and showing that they can make things happen with this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that's another good reason where we talked about before how data management isn't going away. I think it's also a very versatile skill set that, like you said, it applies to every company in a pretty similar way too, right? So if you say you work for like a retail company, you build this skill set, you could go work for healthcare and it'll maybe be a little bit different, but a lot of the same concepts. So again, data management, if you're looking for something that is versatile and is going to have staying power, I think it's a great thing to focus on in your career. So awesome.
And you think about just the language of those different sectors, right? If you're a retailer, you've got shoppers. If you're a healthcare company, you've got patients.
Yep.
Right. But there's
minor differences, but
there's still relationships. I mean, there's still relationships. There's still entities that you have to disambiguate. There's still hierarchical. There's still categorizational things. They move to a manufacturer and they've got consumers and they've got customers who are their retail. Just learn that language of that business, and all of a sudden you start to see these connections because there are the similarity. That's the journey I went through, realizing, okay, these things are all, for instance, they're all relationships. Now, how do we deal with relationships in data? How do we deal with brands? And, everybody's got a brand, might be a product, a service, an offer, whatever it has to be. But, it's still that entity type, that concept is still the same.
Yep. Yeah, it's awesome. So Scott, this is sort of a different topic, but I think a really good one. So this is from Daniel, and Daniel says, so Scott, you talked before about when you're live, some of the things that you do to get an audience's attention and really deliver. He's asking a question about when you're delivering digital presentations. What is your camera or screen setup so that you can look right down the barrel? I think you've been really engaged. We're having this conversation. Any tips on that, like how to really connect with the audience when you're doing it virtually?
Thank you. Is that Dan, whoever mentioned that? Thanks for noticing. Yeah, I am looking straight at my camera here. Okay, I'm not looking at John. I see
Yep.
him moving.
Yep.
But that's the kind of craziness that and I got better at it during COVID, where I did a ton of webinars on purpose to get better at this part.
Yeah.
So a technique is to literally look right at it. And so I've got a better camera now than I used to. I've got a single lens reflex camera, so I can see a little dot. I had a kind of a Logitech webcam. I put a red sticker on it to just look at that, but it takes some practice, and you'll be surprised at how much you can see out of your peripheral vision.
Yeah.
But there's this, yeah, I find it kind of, it's not ironic isn't the right word, but the fact that, you know, John and I are looking at each other straight in the eye, only we're not.
Yep.
We're both looking. It's that. So having that presence, having that focus, sound is really important. You know, some things I've learned, you know, audio is more important than video when you're doing digital, because people will look at a lousy image, but they will not listen to a bad audio for very long. So do that. To John's point earlier, watch yourself.
Yep.
Meaning look at your own recordings. How does that work? I'm so well rehearsed to a certain extent on when I do a deck or a webinar, that I know what's coming, and a lot of my visuals just support the concepts I'm talking about. So I've got a lot of miles in to be able to do that and make it sound like it's fresh every time, or certainly hope so. But yeah, you got to look right through that thing. I mean, all I'm doing is staring at a lens this whole time. I'll kind of glance around a little bit, but that's about it.
Awesome. Yeah.
There's
Scott.
a great book I've read called "Look Me in the Eye." It was a really handy book. And for me, and it was the woman who wrote it, I wish I had her name, but if you Google her, you'll find it. It's called "Look Me in the Eye," and it's a book about, it was basically a sales book, but I did it for technique on digital presence. And there were a lot of great tips in there. There were a lot of things I knew already, but that's always nice because that's validation that you're doing the right thing. But for folks who don't have the kind of miles that I do on stage and in this kind of media, whatever you can do to focus on that telling part to bring it back is really important.
Yeah, it's fantastic advice. I love it. And it makes such a big difference to feel like you're really connecting with the speaker. Then, you know, if I'm looking all around here.
Yeah, it's hard. I'm dying to look at you, but I can't look at you. I'm dying.
Yeah.
Like, okay, there he is. Okay, no, it's just back up here.
Yep, it's hard, and it's a great question, Daniel. Thank you for that. So, I think we're right up at time. Scott, thank you so much for doing this today.
Fun.
Audience,
you bet.
thank you guys for all showing up. Great questions. Check Scott out again, LinkedIn. Check out his book, and hope to see you all here for another episode soon. We do this every week and would love to have you. All right.
Super.
Take care, everybody.
Bye-bye.